I think we're live now. It says we're live now. All right. I'm going to screw your last name up horribly. But anyway, Jacquelyn Aluotto, right?
Aluotto.
Aluotto. Okay. Very close. Me getting that wrong is not the big thing. The big thing is, all right, hybrid producer, innovator, advocate, activist. We'll get into all those different things later. But basically, one question. Is there any hope for this world?
Oh, wow. I think there's a lot of hope for the world.
Okay.
I think there's hope for the world if we really stop and listen and hear what the world and God is telling us. And I think that if we are all mature enough and responsible enough and hold each other accountable and ourselves, then I think that there's a lot of hope in the world. I just think that it's really hard for people and adults to have honest conversations. And it's a lot easier now for everyone to be pointing the finger and not really saying, we all have a part in all the messes that are happening in the world. And we need to stop pointing the fingers and really finding solutions so we can just make a difference and help people.
All right, you've changed my mind. I was going up on the roof right now after this thing, but all right, so there's some hope. Real women, real beauty, real women. I always get it wrong, but one of those is amazing. How did you start that?
Okay.
I've only known you 10 years with this one.
I know. I was going to say, most people don't know that we've known each other for a while, and we've been in media, and we've been on each other's shows a couple times. So it's Real Beauty, Real Woman. Real Beauty, Real Woman really started out of a need to make a difference in the world when Not in My Backyard first happened, which was my first documentary where I had spent 7 years going across America, filming in underground battered women in shelters. I really wanted to show how women and children were fleeing abuse in America. And I just was so young and naive. I thought that once people knew how people were suffering, people were going to stand up, make a difference, and want to help one another. And while that didn't happen, and we didn't change legislation, but the film got a lot of awards, and that just wasn't good enough for me. So Real Beauty, Real Woman was created to merge beauty, glamour, entertainment with social responsibility. And we really wanted to make activism sexy. So past over a decade later, I think activism is really becoming sexy, and that's really, people are becoming a lot more conscious, and they do want to make a difference. But we were one of the firsts. And so what happened was a lot of people followed in our footsteps, thank God. And now we are in the top 10,000 most visited websites in the United States and under top 100,000 globally. So we have an incredible movement, and we are just blessed. Like, God has really blessed us.
Well, I think you have a lot to do with that. You're very, very humble. When you first went in to see the homeless shelters and the places where people had nowhere else to go and nowhere else to turn, I think you were probably surprised about the horrible things that were taking place there that's supposed to be a safe space.
Yeah, so what I learned, traveling the country was I really wanted to study organizations, shelters, safe havens that were breaking the cycle of violence, poverty, homelessness, and abuse. And what I learned is that there are programs that perpetuate it, and there are programs that break it. And along my journey, a big thing that I learned was, at the time, 20 years ago, they didn't say the word human trafficking. They talked about child prostitutes. And for me, that was really alarming, because I didn't understand how children could be prostitutes, even if they thought that they were willing participants, because they're victims and they're children. And what happened was going to all these different shelters and communities, I kept on meeting these children who were runaways. A lot of them were in the foster care system.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that later.
And they were being trafficked. And so I really started studying programs and shelters that were making a difference with them. And what I found was this: in order to break we're dealing with intense social issues in the United States and in the world. But in order to really deal with them, yes, you do need your clinical PhD approach, but you really do need a holistic and loving approach. Most places at that time, they weren't trauma informed, so they couldn't be trauma appropriate or trauma responsive. And so they weren't breaking the cycle. And women were going back and being abused, and so were children. The shelters and the safe havens that were really making a difference, it was really hard for them, because the government was telling them, when you're a domestic violence victim, after 30 days, you need to leave the shelter. And if you know anything about homelessness or relocating or moving, and then to add on top of it, domestic violence, having children, what can you do in 30 days? There's not really much you can do in 30 days. and you'd be really harming someone more than helping them.
There's no job in place. They don't have anywhere to go. There's no money, and they came from a place where they were being beaten, and they've got a young child, 30 days and out. I knew the system was disgusting, but that's insane.
Yeah.
That doesn't help anybody. It's not like, oh, get everything together. I'll just get a job and I'll go to college and I'll get a degree and my kid will be in a program and everything's fine. That's ridiculous. One of the things that blew me away, I can go online and basically find out anywhere where someone is. Not necessarily if they're in a shelter and they're, hopefully safe. But if I stalked a girl and they said stop stalking her, I could find out everything, her new phone numbers, her new addresses, her new everything, unless there's some special FBI thing helping her out. How is that? One, I don't want my phone number available to anybody who pays $20. Right. What about somebody who, a poor girl who has some psycho guy from high school bothering her? Is that ever going to stop?
So the issue is with even everything happening is legislation. You really need legislation change because the internet is so new. How we use it for social media. I mean, everything that laws on the internet are not the same as in real life. And so that's a problem because if we don't get our legislation correct, we really aren't protecting the innocent. What we're really doing is we're really help out predators. We learned a lot about that with the FOSTA SESTA bill because there was a website called Backpage where they were selling people on 3 different continents. And Backpage was making over $600 million. Craigslist were selling people, and it's just very lucrative to buy and sell people for sex. And one of the things was we wanted to take Backpage down and hold them accountable. And it was a big thing because there's not laws set in place to really protect victims. And if we want to protect our privacy, whether we're being stalked or not, we really need to all come to the table and say, these are the legislation changes that we're demanding that our government does.
Wow, 600 million. I think they used to have castings or something on that, if I'm not mistaken. That I used to do that. Yeah.
So that's Backstage.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. I knew it wasn't the same thing. I was like, wait a minute. How did I miss the prostitution when I'm trying to get an extra in a student film? Okay.
But they do sound so similar.
It's been a special long day, my friend. Okay. Backpage, Backstage. All right. Somebody's getting fired. All right. Now this break the cycle, you joined forces with the Congresswoman Lee.
Sheila Jackson Lee.
Okay. How easy is it to get to these people and then beyond that, getting them, obviously nobody doesn't recognize, they all recognize the problem. Getting them to change their mind, change their vote, or get involved. Do they just see this not a popular issue, or this is too much for me to get involved in, or long term, this will take forever? Because I know you were at Congress and you
sure
and everything.
So I think the big issue with human trafficking and what most people don't realize is it's a very lucrative business. So it's the second biggest illicit business in the world. And what most people don't understand is that a lot of times billionaires are behind it or making money. Jeffrey Epstein was one of them. And what other people don't realize is there's a difference between capitalism and corporatism. And so people keep on saying that this is a capitalistic society, but this isn't a capitalistic society. This is corporatism. And corporatism is where corporations rule your government. They are the ones that dictate and have more power than the government. Because what happens is what most people don't realize is when you run to become the president, your campaign costs so much money that if it's Monsanto or it's oil or it's big pharma, and those are the people that are supporting you, you now are beholden to them. You now are beholden to pass laws for how we eat, what we see in the media, who's going to fuel our homes. And so people don't realize that. So when we went with Congresswoman Lee to really try to stop Backpage and to make it be taken down, one of the big companies that tried to block us was Google and all these tech companies. And the reason why is because with tech companies, even though they don't want to really discuss this, is for every click, they're making 5 cents per ad. And it's very lucrative. And so it becomes an issue of we live in a society where it is profit over people. We live in a society that's driven and a government where it has always been profit over people. And so what we have to do is it has to be people over profit, but in a very rational and logical way. I'm not to the left and I'm not to the right. I'm in the middle. And when I say that, it's, we all need to be accountable for our actions. But one of the things with corporatism is until we really get educated on how our laws are created and why laws aren't in effect, we're not going to be able to really combat corruption and put in solutions to protect people.
Wow, that's well said. I'm taking notes because profit over people and corporatism, I always believed in corporatism that, big pharma and oil and all those different companies, they say you do this, you do that. And then you have self-regulating where it's like the senators are voting on how they should be punished for certain things and what things apply to them and what don't. And if you're self-regulating, it's never going to happen, especially if you're getting financed from the outside and you go, okay, we have to vote on big oil. Okay, well, the last 90 people who are sitting in my seat, were financed by big oil.
Exactly.
That's unbelievable.
And it's not just the president, it's everyone in Congress, everyone in Senate, your senators, your local politicians. Everybody is funded through money, and that becomes a conflict of interest. It should be that your political campaign, you should not be able to take any money, and it wouldn't matter if you were very wealthy or middle class or lower class. The right candidate should be in office.
Right. I remember back with Hillary Clinton, they were always talking about campaign finance reforms. And I thought, absolutely. And now you have these super PACs where, as a billionaire, I could come in and give $400 million to it, and they're able to somehow use that money, and that's acceptable because it's a super PAC. So you have, like you said, somebody who, let's say, is a casino tycoon with $29 billion making big influential decisions that he feels should happen for the country.
And I could be wrong on that, but I think it was Obama that passed that law.
Really?
Yeah. And I could be wrong, but you'll actually see with all politicians, they speak so passionately about what their causes are, but then if you go back and research the bills that they are not pushing through and not advocating for, you realize that they all talk out of both sides of their mouth.
Well, you're right about that, because I just never understood. You have these people and they talk about women, equal pay for women. I just thought that fundamentally would be against the law, that there wouldn't even be a vote or a side on that. And it makes no sense. And still, even within the government, I've read Wall Street Journal's article saying the government is still paying women less for the jobs. And I thought, okay, it's insane. And then forget about, how they're treated in public and things like that. Well, hopefully that will change a little bit more. You went to the precinct, the second largest precinct. That's pretty amazing. Tell everybody what you did there for the border towns.
And basically, Real Beauty, Real Men, and Break the Cycle, we always were into advocating for children of human trafficking and domestic violence, and going into the court system and watching how public defenders and just really how the court system works was very troubling for us. And I say that because a lot of these kids that are in the juvenile detention centers, they are in there and they they come from communities in crisis. And a lot of them are victims themselves. And so when you start watching how public defenders have 500 cases and they're not even seeing these kids, these children end up then staying in detention centers and then really end up having a life of crime because no one's advocating for them. So I started working for the precinct and really talking about how human trafficking works. I think the first week I was there, it was the first time they had ever found missing children, and just really educating them and training them on what human trafficking should look like by being trauma responsive and trauma informed. Police need to be culturally appropriate and competent. As we see, there's an issue with that with certain law enforcement. So my job is a very duplicit job because I advocate for child sex trafficking victims, but I also hold law enforcement accountable when we don't feel like they are following the proper protocol with handling these children and the court system. So it's been really interesting. I enjoy it, and I've learned a lot about law enforcement. I think it's interesting for law enforcement because we expect them to be like psychiatrists and EMTs and all of these things, and they do their training. And I never realized that until I started working within law enforcement itself. And I realized, oh, wow, when we get to a scene for a child sex trafficking victim, we're assessing it completely different. They are assessing it from a crisis standpoint, and I'm assessing it from I need to make sure that these children are okay and what happened to them, and making sure that they understand that someone's there to be advocating for them and making sure that their needs and their rights are met.
That's so necessary, and you're right about there's a way of looking at two different things. I mean, the same thing two different ways, and if you're trained one way, it's not even your fault. Something I'd read, because I knew you were coming on, was and we even talked about this, you told me about this a long time ago, so I read up on it, was the signs, like the training, like you said. They now have sometimes hotel workers are look like in cheap hotels and motels.
Sure.
They are taught how to recognize that this girl might be in trouble or being sex trafficked, and they can help. The more people involved and the more people recognizing that this type of behavior or these situations, she's just not a runaway. There's something bad.
Sure. I mean, that's also in high-end hotels too. Human trafficking is happening everywhere. High-end hotels, motels. I mean, human trafficking is everywhere. It is a pandemic. And it's something that is become so big that people are really, everyone's talking about it because you can't avoid it. Training for hotels, motels, emergency rooms.
Yeah.
Anyone in the hospitality business, sports arenas, stadiums, churches, schools is a necessity. Wherever there are children, there should be training on human trafficking. And wherever there are people, there should be training on human trafficking. Because if you can spot it, you can save someone's life.
The children part just is tough. When I found out about like the Super Bowl, I looked into that, and I heard that that's one of the biggest days of the year, and it's the amount of people coming in that are involved and the women and stuff. It's insane. Is it possible? This is what someone had said to me: just make it legal, and then everything's okay. Now they're doing that with marijuana, and it does have a massive effect as far as the drug supply chain, because that's always been kind of the foundation of it. What's your truthful, what's your experience that would happen if you made something like that legal?
My opinion is that obviously prostitution should not be legal, and human trafficking. And I say that because for the most part, when people think that people are prostitutes, they're human trafficking victims. And I think that that's hard for people to wrap their heads around. But I think that when you start making it legal to buy and sell people, that's very dangerous, because that's really what it is you're buying another person and you're selling them. And I think the scarier part is that most people don't understand is even with prostitutes, there is a pimp involved. There is a trafficker involved. And
somewhere in there. Okay.
Yes. I mean, you do have your renegades, which are women who they are their own trafficker or pimp. But it's just very dangerous. It's not something that I think that we should make legal. Okay. I don't think it should be made legal at all. I think we need to be accepting of it. And when there's stings, when law enforcement has stings, and
I see them all the time on your page.
Yeah, and women and girls are recovered, especially the older women that are saying, well, hey, I do this profession because when I was younger, I was trafficked, or when I was younger, I was raped, and I don't have any other skills. And we're telling people don't do things, but they're saying we can't feed ourselves and we can't feed our children. So I think instead of looking at making prostitution legal, I think we need to look at how did we miss educating so many people? How do we offer more jobs to people so that they can feed their families and not put their lives in danger, or not be beaten, or not be raped? And for me, those are always solutions that I'm looking at, and that when I'm on the recoveries with the women and kids, more so the women, it's okay, well, let's see, like, what have you always dreamed about? Like, what do you have an interest in? What would you like to learn about? Because we can't tell people not to do something if it's their only way that they're feeding their families. They need other options. They need help, and we need to be able to help them.
You're on this crusade, and I've always been so disappointed with the government, but the government spends Well, it was just 3 trillion we're at for Corona. If that went straight to helping people, that would be fine, except so many hundreds of billions, whether they won't even tell you where it went, just disappeared.
Right.
They won't, they publicly say, we're not telling you where $500 billion went.
Which is illegal in itself. So the government and the White House is breaking the law.
They just held up the American public. They just robbed the American taxpayer. That's simple as that. But that type of money, what that's spent, could solve homelessness overnight, fix the education system, fix any kind of thing with jails. There'd be no private jails where they're putting people in jail just to make more money. They could wipe out the entire student debt. I mean, every single thing possible that anyone said couldn't have been done in just one of these things. Forget the 3 trillion, the 1 trillion, wipe them all out. My thing is, you're going up against this kind of thing that's in place, and the financial side of it is impossible because you can't help all these people, but yet the government can. Is there a way? I call it like the Jon Stewart way. They were going to take away the money from the first responders, who literally most or several died, and all of them are sick, and they were going to take the money away from them for their insurance. Do you remember that? And then Jon Stewart went and embarrassed them day after day after day, and then they kind of voted, and some didn't even show up even after all that. Is that what it takes? Because people, a lot of times, they're so involved in their own lives with their own problems. Like my mom called it the Russia situation, where they make it so you don't have food, so you can't get involved in politics.
Right.
And right now, so many people are unemployed. And that's why they can get away with anything they want now.
Sure. If you create chaos anywhere, people are not really going to focus on the problem at hand.
Right? How can you mobilize? You can't. And people are like, can we do some sort of Jon Stewart thing on certain issues where it gets enough attention, or like how would you prioritize?
I think absolutely. I mean, I think the human trafficking movement has literally mobilized so well with just, first of all, it's over $150 billion industry annually. And when you start talking about that kind of money and the money that you're going up against, and that senators have been involved, judges have been involved. When Epstein was arrested, the reason why nothing happened to him was because the people that arrested him, he was more powerful then. So he was more powerful than the people in Washington because his money was the one putting them in power. And then he was blackmailing them when the ones that were predators, when they were having these sex parties. And so for activists like Conchita Sarnoff for 10 years fight to get that exposed, what happened, and all of these survivor leaders who have overcame being trafficked, saying this is what's happening, and people holding CPS accountable and foster care. I think I'm so proud of the human trafficking movement. I can't even imagine even 10 years ago, the prayers I used to have, even when I moved to Texas here 6 years ago, the resistance, I was meeting the resistance every day, everywhere. People didn't want to acknowledge what was happening. But now, working with the governor's office, working with law enforcement, seeing what HPD is doing with HETRA, which is advocacy agencies and law enforcement agencies coming together in a very different kind of a continuum care of how we are going to combat human trafficking, but also discuss how different human trafficking looks in communities in crisis versus very wealthy communities. So human trafficking is in very wealthy communities. Sexual exploitation of women and children is sadly everywhere. The truth is that women and children are not valued the same as men.
Not at all.
And that has always been the case. And that women have always been objectified. And so in upper class communities, you do see this, but the conversation's never really been had that communities in color and communities in crisis are the most targeted. Those are the ones that it's easy to go after those children. It's harder to get their stories covered on the media. It's easier to make those kids seem like they're bad kids, they're in gangs, they like this lifestyle. I mean, the most ridiculous, hurtful, ignorant things that I've heard. But because of poverty, it's easy to not talk about that. And what I really am proud about the human trafficking movement is seeing all the communities coming together. I mean, Real Beauty, Real Women, we work with the indigenous community because, Native Americans, you want to talk about a slave trade and oppression and the foundation of which this country was built. They really need to be at the table talking about racism and economic oppression. you know, obviously all the communities of color. And then you have very poor white families that children are being sold out of trailers for crystal meth. And the problem is that it is so easy to oppress people of poverty. It is so easy to take advantage of people of poverty. And we all need to be fighting and advocating for them, which a lot of times the kids in foster care, they come from very poor homes. And 80% of children who are domestically sex trafficked throughout the United States come from the foster care and social service system. And that's a huge problem.
80%?
Yeah.
8% is bad. 80% is not just a tragedy, it's an organizational disaster, and
Yes.
it failed. It's not like how, I guess if they put it on the news for one day, everybody goes, oh wow, that's so bad, then they put something else on the next day. But that has, and I can only imagine the money that's in that's going to those programs, like the foster, I mean.
So this is what I learned, because the state of Texas gets $1.9 billion a year for children. And so $1.9 billion a year is a lot. It's also the largest state that has more foster children in it. But this is what I learned in working in the communities, the advocate agencies, the law enforcement agencies, was that when you're sitting with these elected officials, they're not educated on these topics. They got elected, but they're not educated on financial literacy, human trafficking, police brutality. They're not drug trafficking. They're not educated on it. They hire people around them to educate them. And if those people around them aren't educating them right, or aren't educated themselves, or do not know the solutions, it becomes very difficult. And so when I first came here, I was not happy with how the state was being run and with human trafficking, and I was very vocal about it. And I would like to say that in the last year, I really give the state a lot of credit, the governor's office, because they're saying, what solutions, how can we implement it? Like, how can we create change? And I think that that's important. I think that it's going to take special leaders to say, hey, we're not the experts on this. We're the elected officials, but we're not the experts on this. And we need to bring in the experts, or people who are very educated, to implement these systems and change to protect people and to create like a positive impact. So that's what's going to have to happen.
Okay. So the first step is really willingness to accept that I don't know how to solve this. I need someone to help me, and then we'll try to fix it.
Yes, and you need many people. Yeah. So one of the things that I think needs to happen throughout the nation, and specifically in Texas, is we need an advocacy council where we have subpoena rights to see footage of children who have been sex trafficked, or say that the cops re-victimize them and re-traumatize them. That's something that is extremely important, because these are not criminals. These are children, and they are victims. They are looked at as criminals because they don't talk and act the way law enforcement expects them to. But that's because they've been severely exploited and traumatized. And that's something where what that would do is that would level the playing field. So also working with law enforcement is, I learned that they are not used to being questioned. You know, you've had law enforcement for all these years, and they're used to being the boss. They're not used to answering questions, and particularly with like someone for me, I'm a woman and I'm a civilian.
Yeah, you're an outsider and a woman.
Yeah, and I start asking questions. They're like, who do you think you are? You know, that will give advocates and community leaders who are really advocating for victims, because we need victim rights. Victims need to be protected. That will level the playing field, where law enforcement knows that we are holding you accountable. We have an advocacy review board where we will be reviewing specific cases. We have subpoena rights to see how you did those interviews and making sure that you're not re-traumatizing victims. And that would be set up with that each law enforcement agency needs specific protocols and policies when they are handling children.
Yeah, it's just always shocking. I mean, from talking with you, these things that I thought would be there and maybe they just ignored aren't even there. No policies, no special regulations, no anything. Like body cams, that should have been there a long time ago.
Right.
But they turned them off now, whatever.
Mm-hmm. And that should be against the law. If you turn off your body camera, like, you're breaking the law. But so that's the other problem, is that with human trafficking, you have these incredible laws, legislation, and you're like, yes, we're getting somewhere. But if judges don't enforce them, then that becomes an issue. And that has to be a law where judges cannot have their own opinion for when they decide that the law should or shouldn't be broken. The laws are in place. People wrote legislation and they fought for that legislation. To get legislation changed is not easy. So when they do, if you're a judge and you don't enforce it, you should be kicked off the bench.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just was watching all the criminals come out of jail because of Corona.
Oh my God.
Like, are you kidding me? I'm like buried under my bed with mattresses so I don't breathe it, and they're getting out of jail, and they were releasing 2 cop killers. It was in the Post. I'm sorry, get Corona. Too bad, you should die. Cop killers? My God.
Right, exactly.
If you sold a bag of weed, fine, maybe let you out. I don't even care. But the violent thing against someone else?
So I think criminal reform has really jumped off the track. Criminal reform was created so that innocent people were going to jail for crimes that they didn't commit, or these low-level crimes, whether it was like marijuana or just a mild offense, and they were going to jail for a much longer time than they ever should with criminals. What most people don't realize is that the hardened criminals, like traffickers and child pornographers and violent offenders, they have the money to get out of jail. So the victims who were incarcerated and shouldn't have been are still sitting in jail, while the violent offenders are getting out, which are a complete menace to society. And that's not criminal reform. Where are the victims' rights? And this brings me to, a point of, they just in Pennsylvania, there was a case where the judges were child trafficking the kids. They were taking money and putting the kids in foster care or back to their fathers. And they just let this judge out. It's so disgusting because he may get coronavirus. Well, sir, if you get coronavirus, that's your problem. You broke the law and you need to stay in jail. You cannot buy and sell children or use your court system to create a profit, because the message that sends is that, hey, we can do whatever we want and we're going to be able to get out of jail because we have more rights than the victims that we ruined their lives. And that is not justice.
I understand what you're saying. I have my feelings about what should happen to people like that. And that's insane, getting out. On a big level, the people at least who are trying, is there an organization where, let's say, the FBI, the CIA, the Homeland Security, are they in the loop with each other, or is it disenfranchised to the point where, because I've heard a lot of times they have no idea what the other's doing, and one was on you see the things, oh, look who just killed so many people. He was on a watch list and he just flew into America, 4 months ago. Good watch list, very useful.
So traditionally, law enforcement has not spoken to each other, other law enforcement agencies. But I think now with human trafficking cases and databases that we're building, specifically for child sex trafficking, that all the law enforcement agencies will talk, because they have to talk in order to combat illicit crimes like this, which are billions upon billions of dollars, and to keep communities safe. You really need to have all law enforcement be talking and communicating about it on a regular basis.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you share the information, what you can do is exponentially more efficient. I never understood that. Now, there was an Army base that you talked about, which I could not believe what had happened. What's going on with that one? People disappearing.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about that, but I want to say something about this no-knock warrant law. And I know this is going to be very not popular, but I really want to talk about this because for the corrupt law enforcement that is out there, obviously I have a lot of love for great law enforcement officers that I go on recoveries with that risk their lives and recover children and leave their homes every day. I have a lot of respect for them. For the complicit cops, I think that they should get tripled the time because that they are abusing their power. The law enforcement that broke into Breonna's home, I believe her name was Breonna Taylor. My issue with that is to get a warrant, a judge has to sign off on it. There are steps to get warrants. And so I don't understand how there was all these different steps. and a judge would just sign off on a warrant for the wrong home. And then they went to the home. And even if you go to a home of a criminal, that's the correct home, you just can't shoot them. You would only shoot them if you were like protecting your life. And so I want to know what was the home that they were supposed to go to, like the right home. Was it a violent offender that required a no-knock warrant? Was it a sex offender? Because the way they went into that house, and I say this because taking away no-knock warrants is not going to protect people. Getting rid of corrupt cops is what's going to protect people, and holding them accountable, but not just them accountable. The DA's office that signed off on that warrant has to be held accountable. The chief of that police agency needs to be held accountable. I read that these men had 2 other previous sexual assault charges. And I read that that young lady was holding her hands up saying, please don't shoot, you're in the wrong home. And they shot her. And so that shows like ill intent. But I want to know, was there a different reason why they chose that home? Because that whole break-in to me is very off. I want to know if the person that was supposed to be arrested, the person for the original warrant, were they arrested and what was their crime?
Right. And you hear none of that. And no, as far as I know, no charges have been brought against them, at least as of, I think, 2 days ago. All of them.
Right. They created the law, but the law is not what's going to help. It's holding corrupt police or anyone that believes in murdering innocent people accountable. And so for me, a no-knock warrant is very scary, because if we go into a trap house and you're trying to recover children, knocking on the door and giving people time, you're not going to be able to recover and rescue children. You're just not, that's not how an extraction works. Alicia, who spoke at our gala, who was kidnapped from a gentleman, when the FBI found the address, because he was raping her and torturing her online, and then said that day that he was going to murder her, if the FBI wouldn't have literally just barged into that house in that basement, who knows what would have happened? I mean, knocking on criminals' doors and giving them time, like violent offenders, sexual predators, serial killers, time to be like, hey,
murderers, yeah, too.
Murder, that's not going to work.
Right.
And so I think the definition of when do you do a no-knock warrant, and if it is going to be a no-knock warrant, whoever also signs off on that warrant is going to be held accountable, just like the police. Because then in this case, not only would the police have to have been arrested, but the DA who signed off of it should have been arrested too, and the judge.
All clerical errors, and it leads to someone dying. I agree with you. You do need no-knock warrants because it gives them time to get their machine gun or to kill their hostage or whatever. But it's just like in any case, a guy a cop pulls somebody over for a traffic ticket and winds up killing them. It's the person who is screwed up and doesn't know their job and is out of control. And now they're armed like the army. I mean, they come in like the army. It's absolutely insane. And yet there weren't masks available for the hospital workers, little paper masks, but these guys have $25,000 in equipment on them. It's crazy. So
you were asking me about Fort Hood.
Fort Hood, yes.
Okay. So Fort Hood is a military base in Texas. And in March, there was an undercover sting that no one heard about, where 6 of the soldiers on the base were arrested for a human trafficking ring. And in Fort Hood, hundreds of people have allegedly gone missing. And the reason why I'm startled by all of this is because this isn't something that has been made public. So you have human traffickers on a base. You have people going missing. And then there's this woman soldier. She's 20 years old. Her name is Vanessa Guillen. And she was calling her family, telling her that she was being sexually assaulted by her sergeant, and that they were doing it to multiple women, but that no one would believe them. And she went missing. And she's been missing now for a substantial amount of time. But in the middle of that, they found another soldier who went missing, and they found his body. And prior to that, about a month ago, they had found, and this to me is, I thought this sounded like the cartel, or it did sound like the military had assassinated someone because of how he was murdered. They had found a Jeep burning at the side of a road, and it was a soldier who had gotten shot, specifically like one shot to kill. And when they pulled him out, the Jeep had blown up. And so for me, what that says is that someone murdered him and they wanted to make it look like it was a car fire that blew up so that there would be no evidence of murder or foul play. And with all of these questions of everything that has happened, no one until yesterday is saying, okay, there's foul play, that this woman is missing. But not just foul play. What is happening on that military base? Who was responsible for that military base? Who are their superiors? Law enforcement and the FBI need to go back into the prison where the 6 men were arrested for the trafficking and really start getting some questions. Really answers, because everyone has a lot of questions. Her whole case, from what we know, because with the military it's handled differently, it's really been mishandled. And again, this is where advocates are so important for victims of human trafficking, because had it been in the beginning that they had an advocate, they would be advocating with law enforcement, with the military, and the other advocacy agencies, that these families' demands need to be met, but be met right away, because every day that this woman goes missing is every day that something horrible is worse happening to her, or she could be gone.
Yeah. No, that's incredible. I mean, you think military, it's like they know down to the number of guns and bullets, and you can bounce the quarter off the bed and everybody's shoes are shined. Oh, people are disappeared. Yeah. That's not something that really, every bed is small and everything. It's so organized and regimented. That's, like you said, top down. Somebody knows, and they're at the top probably because it never happened.
And that's terrifying. It's not just soldiers that went missing. It's people in Fort Hood. And so, because there's a Fort Hood base, but then there's Fort Hood. There's like a town. And some people say that there's a cult, and I don't know. I'm not educated on that part. But the way they found their bones and stuff, I would be asking, is this organ trafficking too? Because organ trafficking is extremely lucrative. It's also a very dark subject. But the point is that just hundreds of people don't go missing. Female soldiers just don't call their mother and their sister and say we're being sexually assaulted and then disappear. Yeah. There is definitely foul play, and people want answers, and her family deserves the answers of what has happened. And, hopefully they will get that.
I had never heard about this till you said the other day to me about it. With everything that's on the news and the chaos in the world since Christ, I did not know. And even before Corona happened, I never heard about it. And if all these people have disappeared, this should have been a really big thing that everyone was talking about. So obviously someone's getting that shut down quick. Quick shout out to Vanessa Campo, who loves you. She told me.
Oh yeah, tell her I said hi.
Yeah, I was like, I'm having you on, and she goes, I've been friends with her forever. She's amazing. Everybody loves her. I'm like, I know that. And then also Louis and anyone else that's helped and been there on the team. If you want to shout out to any of those people.
I mean, we have such a beautiful team, from celebrities, whether it's Luis Guzman, whether it's Carl Champley, whether it's Jordan Sparks. We work with incredible celebrities, and then we work with amazing churches. I'm actually filming this right now at the Community of Faith Church, who have been so instrumental in helping to get human trafficking out. To our whole team, Blanca, Tanya, Rich Love, they're also dedicated. And then there's Jacquelyn, there's Annika, because we have another Jacquelyn and Annika to our New York and our New Jersey teams. I could just shout out people all day, because I'm just like this small piece in this puzzle. And it takes like a village to make a difference and mobilize and have a movement. And I'm just a small piece of that. And I feel very blessed that I am a piece of that movement and puzzle.
Now that movement and puzzle has some websites and some social media. What would you like people to go to for information?
And thank God you said that, because Rich Love would say, you got to do social media. So obviously for Instagram, Real Beauty, Real Woman, Twitter, Facebook. And then for our website, you could do www.rbrw.org, which stands for Real Beauty, Real Woman. It's the acronym for it. And then after you see the celebrities that are involved and the cool film projects, the media projects that we're doing, you could also click on the foundation link, which will take
Okay.
you to our BRW's Break the Cycle. And you could talk about, see, our Atlas program, which is holding law enforcement accountable through databases and technology, and just the recovery program. I do want to say this. This is so important. Obviously, like recovering women and children is so crucial, but the aftercare, we're really missing it. And we're missing it because we are so judgmental on how we think that victims and survivors should look. And we really like to, it's been that for whatever reason, our court system and even a lot of times society really places the blames on victims because we just can't believe that predators and criminals could just be willing to do this. And we have to stop that, because when survivors of sexual assault and rape and trafficking are coming to get help and they're trusting advocates and law enforcement agencies to get help, when we don't provide them with the proper care and the proper response, and they're not breaking their cycle and they're not healing, it sends them into a much more downward spiral, because then they think that they can't be helped.
Yeah,
And
it's
this leads
hopeless.
into, yeah, and this leads into addiction and suicide and self-mutilation and letting more rapes and attacks happen. And so I really want to say that I'm so proud of our aftercare program and team. We have a whole sewing and beauty project, but it's not just that. It's really tapping into what people love and what people need to find their spark. You know, sometimes you lose your spark and you lose this passion in you because you set out to change the world and the world changes you. And
Wow.
I
Powerful.
think I think when you can reconnect with people with like love and their passion, you can make such a difference. And just to hold their hand and say, "Hey, I believe in you." I tell my girls and their parents, they'll call me and they'll say, they call me all different things. Jay, Jacquelyn, Miss, you know, they have all different names. We're sorry, you know, they went back to their abuser. And I tell them the same thing that I always tell them. You're never going to have to apologize to me. I'm ask one question of you, and that is to be kind to yourself. Like, you're not hurting me, like you're hurting yourself. And I think that aftercare really has to start with, if you look at how angry our society is, we are a very broken, dismantled society. The foundation of how we were built um, is very broken, and we need to really learn about like self-love and accepting each other and not placing judge and just saying, okay, these are huge problems. We need to implement the solutions, because as everybody's bickering and fighting, more violence is happening and more innocent people are being murdered and raped and trafficked, and nothing is getting done. And people's political agendas are being used, but people really aren't being helped. And so that for me, like aftercare and really holding people accountable, is something that's so important for me.
That's a really important point. It's like someone's in a car accident and they're horribly hurt. Take them out of the car and leave them on the side of the road. That's the same thing. You
Yes.
take the situation, but you don't help them at all. It's hopeless. This has been intense. What can people who wind up seeing this do? Because they'll say, you know, oh, I saw the interview and she's amazing, whatever. But what on a small scale can people do who just happen to be wherever they are, in a great neighborhood, a bad neighborhood?
So there's a few things. Like, first of all, be educated. Go to your local agencies and go to your schools. If you have children specifically, I cannot tell you. Sometimes I really think that I can be very intense about human trafficking, and it is a dark, you know, evil epidemic happening. But people have written to me and said, we never knew about human trafficking, and because of your post, like, we started recognizing that our children were in situations that they shouldn't be in. And that really, like, I was like, wow, I never knew that. Because when COVID first started, I stopped posting stuff because I was like, what really could people handle? And then COVID-19 has exacerbated child sexual exploitation. And so for parents out there, you need to become educated. There are games that your kids play, like these little penguins, they talk to each other, but you don't know that that other penguin is a predator, and he's telling your kid, meet me in this living room. And at first the penguins are just playing nice and innocent like kids would. And then every time the kid goes on, and the penguins start touching the kid, and then they start sending each other pictures. And you have to realize that predators are master of manipulation. And technology and social media, like, you're opening this door for your children. And a lot of times people want to parent their kids through just putting them in front of technology, not understanding that you're letting predators within. So for all people that like want to help or protect their children, each state and city should have local advocacy groups that deal with human trafficking. They need to go to them and ask them to be educated. They need to demand that the schools and the churches that they go to demand human trafficking training so that you know that what human trafficking looks like, what child sexual exploitation looks like. If your child's playing a game and now this game has turned into your child's involved in a human trafficking ring, what are the steps? Well, the person asks me, hey, send a picture of me of yourself. Oh, take off your clothes. You know, there are gradual signs. I think people think that with abduction, like with child sex trafficking, that you just get taken. It's very subtle. It's a subtle manipulation. And
I didn't know that. I did not know that.
Yeah, because you're gaining the trust of someone, and that's how you're breaking them. It's a subtle manipulation where they're twisting you inside and out until you believe that they know you better than yourselves, and they're isolating you from all of your loved ones so that they can manipulate you.
I really thought it was like almost all kidnapping. I really thought that.
No, a lot, and that's another reason why it's hard for human trafficking with the law, because they'll say, well, your child went willing with that person. And it's like, well, yeah, they did, because they thought that was their good friend. They didn't know that they were going to be at a party and then drinking a date rape jug and then raped by all these boys. Or they didn't know that they thought this was their boyfriend and their boyfriend loved them. I mean, it's human trafficking is all about manipulation, and a lot of trauma bonds are formed so that even when you recover the kids, they're going to go back to their predator a lot of times because our aftercare is just not there yet. And so for trauma bonds, all safe havens need to understand, how do you really break trauma bonds? It's kind of like the Stockholm syndrome. You know, women or people would get kidnapped, but then they bonded with their abductor and they felt a love, and it was a codependent relationship. And again, these are master manipulators. And when you start doing that with children, that's where it's even more dangerous, because children blame themselves, and parents aren't equipped for it. I don't think anyone was equipped for human trafficking. So people that want to help, make sure that your churches are educated, your schools are educated, make sure that what's happening in foster care, who are the people that your children are going on play dates with. I'm not letting my child, if my child wants to go on a play date, I will go with my child. I don't know you. You seem nice. Every con artist seems nice. No predator, no wolf says in sheep's clothing, hey, I'm a wolf. You know, they look like a sheep.
I don't like Stephen King and It or something. There's no thing that, you know, it's so obvious.
Right. And so it's just really important. Check with all these groups. God, with human trafficking, we need so much help. It's not just fundraising, it's volunteering, you know, putting care packages together, making sure that those care packages are culturally appropriate, because white girl's hair is different from black girl's hair. You know, it's just, you know, but you want to make sure that everybody's getting what they need. And I would say once you find the advocacy groups in your city, they're going to guide you on how that they need help. And how you can help them. And if you are a lawyer or you have these special skills, donate your time. Like for our workshops, we always ask professionals to donate and volunteer their time to educate the women and girls so that they can break the cycle and that they can get an education.
That's great. I think one of the things that you just said, really, just demand the police station has it, demand, if everybody comes in and demands, there'll be an action. Demand the church, demand the school, demand everything. Nothing's acceptable. You're at a private school, demand if they have it there. Right. And collectively the public does that, well, then all of a sudden there's a reaction. So, all right, our fearless leader, any last things? Did we miss anything? I know that we're going to do this, you know, like on a very, very often basis. I can't thank you enough. The websites, everybody knows to go to. You're breaking the cycle. I know you have the huge team, but you know, I know you put literally your life at risk for this, and other people might say, what? I'm like, yep, life at risk. It's been that bad. I'm so happy we got you on. I know it's been a long time. I've been chasing you forever.
Thank you for being so patient with me. You're a great friend.
I knew you were really busy, and I knew 5 days in a row phone calls unanswered. I'm like, she's saving lives. I can be patient, but we got you. You have the celebs. You had this. We'll talk. Not in my backyard. That's another one you did. You did the thing with Mr. Guzman. That was incredible. So we have a lot more to cover, and this is definitely not over. So until it's over, then the next time we'll have a celebration.
I will see you soon. I just want to ask everybody this. I want everyone to try to be kind to themselves, and really. When we see a post or something that we don't understand, instead of getting angry, this is something that that's helped me is I pray now before I respond to things, because it's so easy to get angry right now. I mean, the energy is just in the air. But if we really do respond to things with love and with a pure heart, when you respond to people a certain way, a lot of times they're going to respond back differently to you. So I would just want to ask everybody to try to be understanding. We're all coming from different walks of life and have different lived experiences, and that's what made us who we are. But we're not going to be able to do this alone. It's unity, and that's the only way it's going to be. So we have to really understand it and respect each other.
Yeah, unity, or it's not going to work, and it's going to be a disaster. I'm going to stop the live thing right now, but you're still here, all right? And